The raven's whisper, a secret they were never meant to hear. That was the first line of the letter, a letter not written in madness, but in cold, calculated revelation. It wasn't meant for the police. It wasn't meant for a jury. It was meant for the parents. 6 years after Grace Budd disappeared, the mail slit open and time stopped. A handwritten confession so grotesque, it didn't just expose a murder, it rewrote innocence. But this story isn't about Albert Fish. It's not about a killer. It's about something deeper. A system of silence, a ritual of manipulation, a legacy of institutional blindness. Because what if I told you, he didn't just slip through the cracks. He was trained to exist inside them. Fish didn't come from nowhere. His mind, fractured, disturbed, depraved, was the natural consequence of dark institutions. Born into an orphanage that punished boys for crying, beaten until pain became prayer, conditioned in silence. And then he disappeared into society, like a sleeper's cell of darkness, until he re-emerged in
Orphaned by design,
clean-shaven,
breaking the boy to build the beast.
Calm.
They didn't call it
That
torture.
year, he walked
They
into
called
the
it
Budd
discipline.
family's life with a lie,
And the walls
a
were
job
lined
offer,
with crosses.
a promise of wages.
Albert
performance
Fish was
perfected
5 years old
through
when they put him
decades of
inside
obscured
St. John's
abuse.
orphanage, not because he
This
did
story
anything
didn't
wrong,
start with a letter,
but because his father died.
started in the back rooms
And
of
poverty has
asylums.
always been the church's favorite
Started
excuse
when the
to own a
system looked
child.
away, when boys
What
were
happened
broken
behind
so men
those
could be
doors
forgotten.
wasn't just abuse.
This
It
is
was
not a murder
ritualized
case.
control. A
a
system
ritual,
designed to break a boy,
a reflection
not
of
just
how
physically
shadows
but
move through
spiritually.
trusted walls,
He was stripped,
how institutions
beaten,
don't just fail us.
starved.
They build the monsters
But what
they
made
pretend
Albert
to
different
hunt.
wasn't how he suffered.
If you're still watching,
It was how
it
he
means you're
adapted.
not like them.
Where most
You're not
boys
afraid
try
to
to
stare
escape
into
the
the dark.
pain, he learned to worship
You're here
it.
to see what was buried,
Pleasure became
and what you're
pain.
about to hear
Pain
may change you
became identity.
forever.
This wasn't
Stay.
discipline.
You're ready.
This was programming. You see, when you fracture a young mind, when you blur the lines between agony and affection, you don't raise a man. You manufacture one. A shell that wears civility like a mask. A vessel for darkness. And this isn't just Albert's story. It's the story of thousands. The orphanages, the correctional homes, the so-called houses of God that ran unchecked for decades, where beatings were called salvation, where silence was demanded, and secrets were currency. Ask yourself, how many boys were broken like this? How many were released decades later into a world that never asked where they came from? Fish would later say he felt God's hand when he was beaten. He was taught to believe suffering was holy. And that belief, twisted, toxic, became the root of something darker. This is what systems do when left unchallenged. They don't fix pain. They farm it. They harvest trauma until it grows into something monstrous. And then they wash their hands. The letter Grace's mother received wasn't just a confession. It was the final echo of a boy who was never allowed to be human, only a vessel for whatever the institution left behind. This isn't just about Fish. It's about the machine that built him, and the silence that kept it fed. You're starting to feel it now, aren't you? The descent. The realization that evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in systems.
The gentleman's mask, how monsters wear polite faces. He wore a suit. He smiled with soft eyes. He spoke gently, like a grandfather inviting you to tea. But behind the eyes of Albert Fish was something most men will never understand, and few survive. When he knocked on the Budd family's door in 1928, he wasn't a predator. He was a promise. A man of means, a job offer in hand, a quiet voice that carried generational charm. And they trusted him, because he looked like the system, polite, educated, safe. But this is what you must understand. Monsters don't grow horns anymore. They wear pressed collars,
They carry Bibles. They speak in the language of your expectations. Because if you want to infiltrate a home, if you want to lead a family into ruin, you don't kick the door in. You shake their hand. The buds were poor, hard-working, looking for a way up. And fish, he studied them. Not for hours, not for days, for years. His crimes weren't crimes of passion. They were ceremonial, designed, executed with the patience of a spider and the mind of a surgeon. The most chilling part? He didn't fake his kindness. He believed in it. He truly believed that what he was doing was meant to happen. There are men like this everywhere. You've seen them. The teacher who seems too affectionate. The executive who always knows your weakness. The politician with a broken past and a perfect smile. We live in a world of well-dressed predators. But you're taught to trust the presentation, not the pattern. You're told that evil is wild, unhinged, screaming in alleys. But the real devils, they send thank you notes. Albert Fish didn't sneak past society. He mirrored it. He studied how to become everything people respect, to do the unthinkable in plain sight. Understand this. There is power in the mask. There is control in expectation. And until you see through the performance, you will never recognize what stands before you. This descent isn't about fear. It's about clarity. And once you see the mask fall, you never forget the face beneath it, the invitation, grace, the letter, and the ritual of return. The letter didn't arrive wrapped in blood. It came folded, neat, ordinary, innocent. But what it contained was a ritual in ink. 6 years after Grace Budd vanished, her mother opened that envelope like any other. No warning, no knock at the door. Just paper, words, and a voice she thought was long gone. But this was no apology. It was a reanimation, a calculated resurrection of trauma. A psychic crime committed in past tense. Fish didn't just confess. He constructed the moment, scene by scene, sensation by sensation. He described how he picked Grace like a butcher picks a calf. He detailed how he lured her with kindness, how she smiled, how she trusted. And then he shattered time. He wrote about her final breaths as if they were his prayer, a communion, a ritual. But here's the part they don't talk about, the part they can't. The letter wasn't written to confess. It was written to complete the cycle. It was the final step of control, psychological domination over the mother's soul. He didn't just steal Grace. He stole memory. He rewrote her death with detail so visceral it burned out any peaceful lie the mother may have clung to. This is not just sadism. This is ritualized energy transference, a psychological concept hidden behind masks of madness. Because the moment her mother read those words, she became bound to him forever. Think of it. 6 years of hope, of clinging to possibility, extinguished in 3 pages. That's not just cruelty. That's alchemy of despair. Pain as currency, words as weapons. And the most chilling part? No court demanded that letter. No lawyer asked for it. He sent it on his own. Because it wasn't for them. It was for him. To relive. To rewrite. To remind the world, I was here, and I was in control. Let this wake something up in you. This isn't about a man. It's about how evil doesn't die in action.
It lives in memory. And when a system lets it echo, the ritual repeats. The system of silence. How institutions protect the predator. Albert Fish should have been stopped. He left signs, obvious ones. He was arrested multiple times, committed to psychiatric hospitals, wrote letters soaked in delusion. And yet, no one stopped him. Because the system that claims to protect us isn't broken. It's designed to conceal, to delay, to forget. Let me make this clear. Albert Fish did not slip through the cracks. The cracks were carved for men like him. Mental institutions marked him as insane. But then let him walk. Courts charged him for petty crimes, but dismissed the deeper ones. His behaviors, his obsessions, were documented and ignored. Because institutions at their core are not built to protect the vulnerable. They are built to protect themselves, to manage optics, to maintain trust, to contain chaos, not eliminate it. So when someone like Fish appears, someone too dangerous to let roam but too inconvenient to confront fully, the system stalls. It delays. It hides behind paperwork and polite bureaucracy. It waits for someone else to take responsibility. And while they wait, monsters evolve. Predators become polite, and little girls vanish into forgotten files. Ask yourself, how many more were lost because of silence? How many mothers pleaded with the police while caseworkers filed reports into unmarked drawers? This is deeper than negligence. This is institutionalized complicity. Because when a predator blends into society, when he dresses well, speaks softly, and pays his taxes, the system hesitates. Not out of caution, but out of fear of facing its own failure. So they protect the image. They shift the blame. They sacrifice the powerless to preserve the illusion. And in doing so, they don't just allow evil to exist, they enable it. Albert Fish wasn't a fluke. He was a byproduct of a machine that knows how to swallow truth. Is the lesson. When horror hides behind a desk, when it's stamped and signed and processed, it becomes untouchable. It becomes policy. And unless you see that, unless you name the system, you'll only ever fight its shadows. Comment to Awaken. Seal the descent into identity. You've come this far. And that means something invisible is shifting inside you. You're not just watching this, you're absorbing it. You feel it, don't you? That tight pull behind your ribs. That cold recognition that the world you were handed was filtered, fabricated, false. The story of Grace Budd wasn't about one man. It was a mirror, held up to a world that chooses comfort over confrontation, tradition over truth, masks over monsters. But here's the moment that matters, the line between who you were and who you are becoming, right now. Because to see darkness is one thing, but to name it, to look it in the eye and claim your clarity, that changes you. Forever. You're not like the others. The ones who scroll past. The ones who blink and forget. You're not here for noise. You're here for power. And power only comes through awareness. Unfiltered, unforgiving, unapologetic. So now you choose. Will you let this fade? Or will you seal it? In the comments, twice, write, "The silence ends with me. The silence ends with me. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but for you." Because repetition is ritual. Words are anchors. And this phrase, this is your threshold. A digital sigil, an oath scratched in binary and belief,
that you will no longer look away, that the next time a soft voice speaks from a dark place, you'll hear what others ignore. This is how men are remade, not with comfort, but with confrontation. So say it, seal it, twice. And understand this: once your eyes adjust to the dark, you'll never see light the same way again. The descent continues now, and from here forward, there is no return. The theatre of pain, when suffering becomes a spectacle, they called it insanity. They called it madness, a sickness, a one-man horror show. But that's not what this was. Albert Fish didn't just kill, he performed. Pain was his stage. Suffering, his script. And every act he committed wasn't just for himself. It was for the audience. An audience that would come later. A mother, a court, a nation that couldn't look away. You have to understand something. This wasn't chaos. This was ritual theatre. Fish turned agony into art. He chose his words with precision, describing the unthinkable with detail so vivid it felt ancient. Not just cruel, not just violent, but deliberate. He didn't see Grace's death as murder. He saw it as sacrifice. A reenactment of older rituals, echoes of forgotten altars and ancient hunger. This is why the letter exists. Not to confess, not to explain, but to preserve the ritual, to pass it on. Look around. The media fed on it. The public devoured it. People lined up to hear the story, read the transcript, feel the fear. They didn't just want justice. They wanted the show. And that's the sickness we never talk about. The reason the world didn't forget the Grace Budd letter is because something in us is drawn to the grotesque when it's told well enough. It's why horror sells. Why true crime dominates. Why real suffering becomes entertainment in the hands of skilled manipulators. But here's the hidden truth. This isn't new. Ancient empires turned executions into public ceremonies. Religions used suffering to inspire obedience. Institutions built power on the back of spectacle. Pain isn't just a warning, it's a tool. And when it's turned into theatre, it becomes a weapon of control. What Fish did, what the system allowed, wasn't just evil. It was a reenactment of a much older pattern. A play rewritten in every age, with new actors, new codes. Tombs, same blood. Don't just see a killer. See the design. Who taught him pain was holy? Who ignored the signs? And more importantly, who profits when pain becomes a show? Because if you think it ended with Fish, you're not looking hard enough. The next act is already being written. Symbols in the shadows. The hidden language of ritual predators. There are things they won't tell you, because they assume you'll never notice. Patterns, symbols, codes. Not in books, not in speeches, but in the spaces between them. The silences, the shadows, the signals. Albert Fish didn't just act. He encoded. His crimes weren't random. They were marked by language, numbers, and repetition. A ritual predator always leaves a trail, but only for those who know how to read it. He spoke in biblical metaphors, referenced divine suffering, and described acts of evil with the reverence of a priest. He didn't kill Grace Budd because she was a target. He chose her because she fit the symbolic profile, young, pure, an offering. That's how ritual predators think. Not in names, in archetypes. They are not bound by impulse, they are bound by meaning. They act when the signs align, when the ritual calls, when the pattern tells them it's time. And society?
It keeps those patterns hidden in plain sight. Think. The recurring numbers, the positioning of names, the dates of abduction. Why so many of these events happen around solstices, equinoxes, or religious feasts? Why the letters are filled with symbolic language? Because this isn't just about sickness. It's about belief systems twisted into darkness. Unholy liturgies, rewritten not to heal, but to consume. You think it's over? You think ritual predators disappeared with black and white crime photos? No. They evolved. Now they use logos instead of sigils, psychology instead of superstition, institutions instead of altars. But the signs are still there. In the phrasing of certain statements, in the imagery used in campaigns, in the unexplainable consistencies that show up again and again across tragedies. Albert Fish left letters. Today, they leave press releases, coded language, public rituals, false flags. Look, D.
But Dan, these people speak a language not of words, but of symbolism, because they believe symbols carry power. And power, when cloaked in silence, controls perception. So here's your awakening. The ones who rule from the shadows do not speak openly. They speak in patterns. And if you cannot decode those patterns, you are not just uninformed, you are asleep. But now, you're waking up.
Architect of Affliction, the mind of the ritual killer. This isn't about chaos. It never was. Albert Fish didn't act on impulse. He calculated. He orchestrated. He constructed suffering like architecture, brick by brick, layer by layer, until it became a monument of control. This is the part most men don't understand. A ritual killer isn't just deranged. He's disciplined. Pain, for him, isn't punishment. It's process. A means of achieving what most people never dare speak aloud, godlike power over another soul. Think about what Fish did. He infiltrated a home, won trust, isolated the innocent, and transformed an act of violence into a sacred rite, not just for him, but for those forced to relive it through his words. That letter wasn't a confession. It was a blueprint. A spiritual blueprint for how to consume another being, physically, emotionally, symbolically. Because for men like him, the kill is never enough. They need witnesses, not just to watch, but to carry the memory, to become unwilling disciples of their design. And the world, it calls him insane, evil, possessed. But listen carefully. That's how the system protects itself. By casting these men as outliers, it refuses to acknowledge the deeper, darker reality. That there's a structure to all of it. These aren't wild animals. They're ritual architects, minds forged in fire, sharpened in silence, and weaponized through trauma. Albert Fish wasn't born. He was built. Through pain, through conditioning, through exposure to systems that valued obedience over compassion. He was taught to suppress, to suffer, to spiritualize agony. And once you believe suffering is sacred, you stop recognizing limits. You start building your own kingdom, brick by bloody brick. This is where men like him live. Not in basements, not in alleys, but in blueprints, mental blueprints of how to invade, infect, and own another, our human soul. And unless you understand the mind of the architect, you'll always mistake the structure for chaos. It's not chaos. It's by design. Every scream, every silence, every letter. Blood in the blueprint. The forgotten pattern of sacrifice. Every age has its rituals. But the names change, and the public forgets. What Albert Fish did to Grace Budd wasn't new. It was ancient. A repetition of something older than language. Blood, sacrifice, binding. The world wants you to believe that human sacrifice belongs to history books, to forgotten tribes, lost temples, primitive minds. But the truth, it just evolved. It put on a suit. It learned to write in cursive. It whispered in psychiatric reports and courtroom statements. But the blueprint never changed. In every civilization, the blood of the innocent has always been used to seal power, to anoint kings, to purify nations, to satisfy the gods of order and chaos. The Aztecs did it on stone altars. Rome fed the arenas. The church buried it in cathedrals. And today, it happens in silence, behind closed doors, hidden under diagnoses, rituals of silence, sealed files. Fish was not the anomaly. He was the reminder, the echo. He acted out what civilizations have always done in shadow: sacrifice innocence to maintain control. Grace wasn't just a victim. She was chosen, a symbolic offering, a name in a ritual that few recognize, but all obey. Because ritual sacrifice isn't about brutality. It's about transference of energy, of guilt, of attention. Take one life and control the perception of millions. Fish fed on the ritual, but society, it fed on the aftermath. The headlines, the trials, the spectacle. And just like that, the sacrifice was complete. Ask yourself, why do stories like these rise and fall like scripted events? Why are certain names remembered and others erased? Because when blood hits the blueprint, when tragedy becomes pattern, a transaction occurs. And someone always profits. This is the part they don't want you to see, that the world still runs on rituals, that blood is still currency, and that the blueprint of sacrifice is not gone, just refined, hidden, gentrified. You're not just hearing about a murder, you're witnessing a formula. And now that you've seen the shape of it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. The names may change, but the altar never really closes. The silence engine. How society converts horror into amnesia. You'd think a story like Grace Budd's would live forever. That we'd carry her name like a scar. That what Albert Fish did would be etched into the collective memory of a nation. But it's not. It's buried. Whispered. Left to rot in yellowed court transcripts and out-of-print books. Why? Because society doesn't forget by accident. It forgets by design. You're living inside a machine, an engine that doesn't run on oil or electricity, but on forgetting. It takes your shock, your grief, your outrage, and processes it, converts it into distraction, packages it into documentaries, flattens it into true crime entertainment. One week you're horrified. The next, you're laughing at memes. This is how the silence is maintained. This is how the machine feeds. And in the case of Albert Fish, the horror was simply too revealing, too raw, too ancient. It broke the illusion that evil is rare, that monsters wear masks, that the system works. So the silence engine went to work. They called him the Grey Man. They gave him a label, a cage of words. They dissected his psychology until he seemed other, something to observe, not be warned by. The story was transformed, not into a warning, but into a curiosity. A footnote, an anomaly, and with that, society exhaled. Problem solved. Monster caught. We're safe again. But here's what no one wants to admit. The silence didn't protect us. It protected the pattern. Because if we truly absorbed what Fish did,
If we truly saw the systems that allowed it, everything would break. The illusion of safety, the myth of progress, the fantasy of justice. So instead, the engine hums. It grinds down terror into trivia, and another generation forgets. But you didn't. You're still here. You didn't click away. You didn't let it fade. And that makes you dangerous. Because now you see it. How horror is ritual, how silence is strategy, and how forgetting is not weakness, it's control. So remember, cling to it, let it sharpen you. Because when you remember what the world tries to erase, you stop being a subject of the machine and start becoming its enemy, the mirror of flesh, what the predator reveals about us. There's a moment in every descent where the abyss blinks back, where the monster you've been chasing starts to look familiar. This is that moment. Because Albert Fish, this decrepit, soft-spoken, silver-haired predator, was not an alien, not an error, not a glitch in the system. He was a mirror. Twisted? Yes. Abhorrent? Absolutely. But a reflection, nonetheless. Of everything our society hides. Of everything we choose not to confront. Let me speak plainly now. What you see in the predator exists in seed form inside every man made in pain. What happens when a child is taught that crying is weakness? That affection is earned through obedience? That suffering makes you holy and silence makes you strong? You create a boy who confuses pain with purpose, a boy who buries his humanity to survive, a boy who might never hurt another, or who might, one day, snap the thread. We want to believe monsters are born, but most of them are built by fathers who hit without apology, by systems that brutalize then release, by cultures that confuse stoicism with numbness, by religions that turn punishment into salvation. Albert Fish was the extreme. But extremes are made from compounding patterns, from unspoken rules, from a society that breaks boys then shames the broken. You've heard his story, you've seen the ritual. But now comes the question you must answer alone. What part of him lives in you? No, not the violence, not the hunger, but the fracture, the silence, the unspoken scars you were told to hide, that still dictate the way you see yourself, the way you love, the way you trust, or don't. Because every man carries the weight of ghosts. Some carry them quietly, others become their voice. But the predator, he is the echo of a world that refused to listen. So I ask you, do you confront the dark to defeat it, or do you confront it to reclaim the part of yourself still chained to it? Fish is dead. His crimes are history, but the blueprint is alive. And somewhere right now, it's replicating. This mirror doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. But if you dare to stare into it, you will never be deceived again. The final door. The choice that breaks the cycle. You've come this far. That means something has already changed in you. Not because of fear, but because now, you see, you followed the thread. From orphanages masked as sanctuaries, to letters written like scripture, to a world so desperate to forget, it buries its own children in silence. This isn't about Albert Fish anymore. It's not even about Grace Budd. It's about what comes next. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it, and that puts a choice before you. A final door. Do you return to sleep? Let this story fade into trivia, another file in the archives of horror, another tale you once watched late at night. Or Do you step through? Do you become one of the few men who carry the fire of forbidden clarity? Because the real war is not between good and evil. It's between awareness and obedience, between those who question the structure and those who bow to it unknowingly every single day. You've seen how pain is shaped, how innocence is fed to systems built on performance, protection, and PR. You've seen how society forgets not by accident, but as a strategy. And most of all, you've seen how truth doesn't scream. It whispers, in letters, in timelines, in rituals dressed as routine. That whisper is now in you, a burden, a weapon, a key. And now you choose. Will you be the next link in the silence chain, or will you become the fracture, the crack in the mask, the man who speaks when others pretend? This was never about entertainment. It was a ritual of another kind, a reversal, an awakening. And if you're ready to carry it forward, then say it again, now, in the dark. The silence ends with me. The silence ends with me, because rituals don't just bind, they can break. And this was yours. Not just to witness, but to embody. Now rise. You're not who you were. You've crossed the threshold, and the world will never lie to you the same way again. End of descent.